we are going to talk about all of the different hearings that are taking place across the country, specifically one that took place in Utah, where legislators are trying to ban these interventions that are harmful to children, to try and change their external presentation so that they're ostensibly more comfortable, and really challenge some of the assertions that have been made in these hearings, specifically by gender doctors who have a vested interest in kids doing this, because basically they're protecting their assets, and they're actually lying. They're really misrepresenting what's going on. They're lying, and they're also being very disingenuous. So we're just going to kind of review some of what happened in Utah, also look at some other gender doctors, and really push back on this idea that they're doing this to help children, because based on what I'm seeing, they're doing it to protect themselves. I wanted to start out just by talking about Nicole Mihalopoulos, who testified in the Utah legislature yesterday at a hearing. And one of the things that I consistently have heard her say and other gender doctors say is, I'm really concerned about children's feelings. It's so important that we honor kids' feelings. Feelings are so important. And yet we have a clip here where we're going to have her talk about the fact that one of the things that teens do is try on identities.
So a lot of teens will engage in some high-risk behaviors because it's part of the nature of adolescence. As they're going through adolescence, they try to see what identities they want to try out.
So basically what she said is that part of being a teenager is trying on different identities. And
that's exactly what teenagers do.
Right.
One of their most important jobs at this time of life, adolescence, puberty, and the teen years, is trying on different identities, figuring out who they are, and settling into what they enjoy, what kind of personality they have, what activities they want to do. And kids they're trying on all kinds of things, and that's normal, and that should happen. My question is, why, once they say, hey, I think I'm transgender, why are we cementing them in that identity?
Right. And not only cementing them, but physically altering their healthy natural trajectory through puberty in order to somehow affirm this identity, when we know that kids try on identities.
Yeah, because there's not a powerful lobby that's going to back you up if your kid is claiming to be, or is saying they're a goth. There is not, the goth enforcement lobby who are going to all get together and discuss the rights of kids to be goths and how they're always going to be goths and they're never, ever going to change their mind and not be goths because there's no money in it. So it's clear that these doctors are talking, are trying to protect their financial interests. That's all they're trying to do. And maybe try to protect themselves from being sued by patients in the future and say, no, nothing's going wrong. Nothing's wrong here. Everything's great. These kids are never going to regret this. They all love the results.
Yeah. And one of the things that just shocks me is how the feelings of these children who are struggling with trans identities are privileged over all other feelings, all other children, all other identities. And one of the things that she said is, she was being very snotty, in my view. She said, God forbid even uses, sorry, that was facetious, even uses the appropriate bathroom for how they feel, okay? That is a really big deal and important for a lot of people because it's unsafe. They feel like it's unsafe, and that's terrible. And she's talking about these kids being able to use the bathrooms of their choice. Never once does she consider that there might be other children who are uncomfortable or scared by having the opposite sex come into their restrooms. And if anybody brings that up, they're considered transphobic and hateful. So she's privileging a certain group of children's feelings above another groups of children's feelings in a very disingenuous way. And then I wanted to just move on to this clip here where, again, she just, I was shocked by her callousness. She was talking about the changes that happen to girls who go on testosterone, who have been on puberty blockers and testosterone. And she says, there are going to be some changes that are considered semi-permanent. And again, she refused to admit these are permanent changes. She talks about them as being semi-permanent because because of modern medicine, we can pretty much change anything if we want to. So they're semi-permanent, such as a thickening of vocal cords, which causes the voice to deepen. And she says there are many people who don't like their voices, and they can take voice training if they need to sound the way they want. And then she says it also causes an increase of body and facial hair. And then she says, oh my gosh, there are lots of cisgender people who have lots of body hair and facial hair. I'm Greek. I spend a lot of money on hair removal. So she can completely mocks anybody who's detransitioned, who is suffering from permanent changes. Again, she refuses to call them permanent changes. She's really mocking them and suggesting their feelings don't matter at all, that there are these, it's silly for, there are lots of hairy women. Why are they worried? There are lots of people who don't like their voice. Why are they worried? To me, it's just so disingenuous.
Like saying to somebody who's been raped, well, you've had sex before, so
yeah, no big deal. Most women like sex.
Yeah,
yeah. And interesting you're mentioning sex, because detransitioners who've had, heinous vaginal atrophy to the point where, and also they're not told about it. They don't know what the hell is going on. So I even remember hearing recently Kira Bell, the detransitioner, being interviewed, and she said that she was unaware of the vaginal atrophy, which was going to occur. And when it did occur, she was really horrified and went to her general practitioner asking for help. Now, that vaginal atrophy may go away, may get better once the testosterone stops being taken. But I would not be the actual, I don't even want to use the words bottom growth, but that's what they refer to the clitoris when it gets bigger. That actually doesn't go back. That stays forever. So you will have, and imagine how distressful that would be to a detransitioner to have that in their as that is part of them forever now.
Right. And I've actually read stories from detransitioners, and they're quite distressed about it because, as you said, the clitoral growth can be significant. So it can go from being, just a, tiny little thing to being a very significant clitoris. And that's something that is permanent. And so for doctors to suggest these are semi-permanent and they're reversible, first of all, it's assuming money, because it takes a lot of money to have vocal training. It takes a lot of money to have electrolysis. Insurance companies aren't going to cover that. And as you said, the clitoral growth is permanent, not to mention, as I've heard detransitioners talk, there are other changes. Their bodies are just different. They're permanently changed. And I thought we could watch a clip of a couple of detransitioners talking about what they struggle with.
When I was 16, I started on puberty blockers, and I was on that for a year. And I continued with it for an extra year along with cross-sex hormones. I felt angry that, no one was there to really say any different, and I was allowed to run with this idea that I had, or, almost like a fantasy.
So that's a permanent change.
But one of the effects is the deeper voice. It's something I will never probably be able to change. I wished I could. There are just many changes that come from it that you would never expect in a million years.
When my voice started to change, I was elated. When I got top surgery, I was elated. And so naturally, because I was elated after each step, I thought, that meant that I was going in the right direction. But when it was finished, I was left incomplete, broken. I couldn't even say the words, I regret my transition. I couldn't bear to hear myself say it. It was the unthinkable. It was my greatest nightmare.
Seeing those clips and talking to some of these detransitioners, their voice is so deep that oftentimes they're actually, they have a hard time getting people to believe that they're actually women. This is a permanent change. And the fact that Dr. Mihalopoulos was so willing to just make light of that is just shocking, when her whole justification for medically transitioning kids is that they have distress over their bodies.
But then if the child or young adult decides that they really are not transgender, they want to go back to living as their own sex, then who cares? Who
Right.
cares how they feel? Who cares what goes on with them? And I keep hearing from detransitioners that once they've decided they don't want to live as transgender anymore, they want to go back to their birth sex, they go back to their doctor and they're just dismissed. The doctor won't see them. Nobody will help them. Insurance plans aren't covering detransitioning. Why not? Why not?
Why not? Because they're really left on their own. Not only that, but oftentimes they're really mocked by these kind of doctors, and they're rejected. They're often ostracized from the community that formerly had been affirming and embracing them. And again, I think it has to do with money. Like once they've been on the trans train, the doctors have gotten their paychecks and they don't care anymore, which is just incredibly callous.
Well, and when you look at, this might be a little bit tangential, but when you look at like the American Academy of Pediatrics, who put out their statement about transgender policy, that was 37 people. That was a team of 37 people. And it even says right in the document that this doesn't necessarily represent what the rest of the academy thinks. But this team of 37 put together this document. The two primary people, the two primary doctors who wrote it and consulted on it, both have financial ties to gender clinics.
Right.
How is that not a conflict of interest?
Well, and we see this over and over again. And I just want to run a clip next by Johanna Olson-Kennedy, who is a doctor in LA who has said some of the most outrageous things. But again, this is a response to a concern about detransitioning.
Here's the other thing about chest surgery. If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
Yeah, well, that's completely ridiculous. If you have your breasts removed, then you remove your breasts, okay? You can go and get plastic silicone put in your body, but you cannot replace you cannot get your breasts back. You cannot breastfeed. Those breasts will forever be, those so-called breasts will forever just be discs inside of your body. And if anybody's ever seen the results of the double mastectomy, they remove so much skin. I actually doubt that they would be able to do anything even remotely successful. They remove the nipple as well, so your function, the sexual part of nipples is of course completely gone as well. It's just so completely ludicrous. I don't know where she gets off on saying these things. These people, I think that she should really be interrogated on this idea that these people are going to have anything that resembles sexual function. I mean, if these people have phalloplasties, vaginoplasties, they're not going to have sex lives, like the rest of, it's almost like they're denied it, because you can't explain to a 14 or to a 12-year-old, you'll never experience orgasm. They don't know what that means. They don't know what it would be in a relationship because they don't even know anything about themselves. You say to them, you'll never have a regular romantic, sexual relationship with a partner.
They're not worried about it.
Yeah, of course they're not worried about it. It's no big deal.
At that age, that's actually, they would think that's a good thing, because some of these kids, they're on the autism spectrum, they have trauma, some of them have been sexually assaulted. Being told you're never going to have a sex life, some of them are like, woot, great, I don't want one, because they have not healed from their trauma. They have not grown through puberty. They have not achieved adulthood. If I had been allowed to make choices for myself when I was 12, 14, 16, I would have really screwed up my life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I actually went into my doctor when I was in high school and asked him to do a hysterectomy, and he wouldn't. And I'm very grateful that he didn't, because I wouldn't have my 3 beautiful children. So there also is this contention that this doesn't happen to children, that, the surgeries don't happen to children. So I'm just going to run this clip by somebody who represents Kaiser Permanente.
In terms of general reconstructive surgery, I don't think surgery actually happened until 16 that have had vaginoplasty. In terms of masculinizing top surgery, I think 12 is the youngest who's had surgery through our program.
To me, the fact that this guy is willing to just pretty, casually talk about a 12-year-old having her breasts cut off is just shocking to me. And one of the things that that the Dr. Mihalopoulos in the hearing in Utah said yesterday that just really blew me away is that she kind of was pushing back on the idea that these girls were having mastectomies. Instead, she was trying to frame it that they were actually having reconstructive surgery. They're having chest reconstructive surgery. So they're really the manipulation, the way in which they're using language. All of this is about them trying to justify what are horrific interventions. As Kira Bell mentioned in that clip, nobody told her what was going to happen. And that's because these doctors are denying that puberty blockers have any kind of permanent effects, when in fact we know that if you induce a developmental delay on somebody, you can't go back in time and get that time back. Not to mention the bone fragility that we're seeing, the lowering of IQ. And once we see, I mean, we don't even have longitudinal studies. This is just what we know based on studies of adults. The fact that we're using puberty blockers, which were actually originally used to chemically castrate sex offenders, and they determined that it violated the rights of the sex offenders because the side effects were so profound that they no longer use it for that, but we're willing to give it to 8-year-old children. And these doctors are somehow justifying it and saying it's all about the children's feelings. We don't want to hurt their feelings.
I've also heard something else that's quite disgusting, and that is shifting the blame onto people like Kira and saying, "Well, Kira lied a whole bunch to get her to get her hormones and to get her puberty blockers." That may very well be the case, but she was 14 and distressed about her body, so of course she's going to be adamant and perhaps even exaggerate parts of her history. That's what 16-year-olds do. That's what 14-year-olds do. We cannot blame them. We have to shift the blame to the doctors who should have been safeguarding these kids.
Well, and we know very well that this is what these kids are taught. We have seen doctors and gender therapists and counselors telling these kids, oh, to get the puberty blockers, tell your parents you're going to commit suicide. Tell them that you've felt this way all your life. There's a script that these kids are taught. And I think people give far too much credit to the gatekeepers and the experts, and oh, doctors are far too altruistic to ever do this. And it reminds me of about 15 years ago, I was talking to someone and he wanted to get a second home. He was going to take out this big mortgage to get a second home so that he could have a rental property. And I said, you need to be careful. You don't want to take out more, collateral from the bank than you can afford. And he said, Maria, a bank's not going to let me take out more than I can afford. Well, now seeing that's exactly what banks are doing. And that's why the housing market in the United States collapsed in 2007-8. Because they were very happy to extend far too much credit. Why? Because they wanted to make money. They did not care about the homeowners, just like these doctors do not care about these kids.
Well, and one of the arguments that one of the doctors made is that the legislators should never interfere with medical doctors' care. And I'm thinking, opioids.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Erin. It's so funny that we're talking about all of this medical malpractice when you have towns in America where you have, the complete decimation of towns because of opioid epidemics. Right. Some people whose entire generations have been wiped out because of opioids, who were at first prescribed by doctors. And then you even had unethical doctors in Florida dispensing them like candy. If we've seen this happen before. It's like we're thinking, oh no, doctors are just they would never do this. Of course, never. No,
wouldn't it be wonderful if we didn't have to worry about this? But what I think concerns me the most about this is when you have doctors that are so blatantly lying about things. Some of the lies in these hearings has just blown me away. The fact that they're willing to be so absurd in the things that they say, and make their case in a way that is provably wrong. For them to say this is all research based. That's not true. That's just not true. And they were saying that. And ultimately, I think this is going to undermine people's confidence in the healthcare system, because in, 5 or 10 years, however long it takes, and we start having all of this hitting the fan, people's confidence in their doctors is going to be decimated. These poor kids are going to feel completely betrayed by the healthcare system, as well as their parents, as well as those who have watched what's happening. And so these doctors aren't just hurting these kids. They aren't just hurting the kids' families. They're hurting the entire society with these lies.
Yeah. And I think also, Erin, I think it's very important that everybody who's afraid, everybody who is concerned, parents, that they know that they have a place to turn to. Partners for Ethical Care operates a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week chat, where you can come and chat to one of our volunteers or chat to one of our members about your concerns. We can also definitely talk to detransitioners who have nowhere else to turn. Very important to keep reminding everybody that, we exist, and we're not just here to make videos and to make a fuss about things. We're here to actually do action. So come to our website if you're concerned, start to speak with us, and we can actually direct you to resources.
So I appreciate you mentioning that we have this chat, because clearly these doctors that are pushing these interventions, they don't care when somebody realizes that they've made a mistake. I've heard horror stories of them not returning calls when someone has a concern, or if a detransitioner comes in and says that they need help getting off the testosterone, getting off the estrogen, getting back to normal, that they're either mocked and told it's no big deal, or the doctor actually tries to get them to stick with the transgender identity, where if you come to our website, there's somebody there who can actually talk to you if you're struggling after something, one of these horrendous things that doctors have done. And it is one of the reasons we set up Partners for Ethical Care, is that we saw this vacuum, that these kids, young adults, are just being dropped by doctors. Once the doctors have gotten what they want, they don't care anymore.
Yeah, and also I think it's really important just to emphasize that you can come and visit us if you're from Italy, if you're from Spain, if you're from Australia, Canada, wherever. You don't need to be in the United States for us to be able to help you. Our full name is International Partners for Ethical Care, and we obviously really want to broaden our network, connect with parents, help connect parents with each other, and if you are frightened, or if something has happened and you think nobody's going to understand you, we're here, okay? And we definitely understand you.